Privatisation of railways harms the nation. BJP-led NDA government proved that they are for corporates but not for common poor people. Railway privatisation is a big blow on the middle class and poor people of this great country. Indian Railway is the lifeline of our country and the only transport available for common people of this country at a cheaper rate. It is the fourth largest railway network in the world, carrying more than 2 crore people daily from one end to another end. It is the world's largest railway network under the Government of India. Railways plays a key role in the economy and in providing cheap transport to the poor and middle-class people. This BJP-led government decided to hand over many key functions in railways to private companies such as railway stations, production units, passenger trains, dedicated freight corridors, CONCOR, IRCTC, vacant railway lands, etc. During the last 3 decades, policies adopted by successive governments were to hand over profit-making public sectors to private hands. But this BJP-led government now decided to hand over profit-oriented public utility service railways, which is providing basic and essential services to its citizens at affordable rates. This process of privatization reached its peak now under the second tenure of the BJP-led regime. In its first tenure of governance, in 2014 itself, the BJP-led government set up a high-level committee, led by the Niti Aayog member, Bibek de Broglie, to study and prepare a roadmap to privatize railways in the name of modernization and world-class facilities. The committee recommended the roadmap of unbundling of railways to hand over in piecemeal to the private corporates. The government announced 100% FDI in almost all the activities performed by Indian Railways, like construction, operations, maintenance, rolling stock, dedicated freight corridor, train sets, etc. Within days of returning to power for the second time in 2019, the government announced labor law amendments to kill the trade union movement, which protects labor interests. It made its intention clear to sell all government-owned profitable industries to Indian and foreign companies. The 100-day action plan of the Indian Railways included corporatization of the production units and running private trains. Privatization of railway stations has already been started in its first tenure. BJP-led NDA government has chosen the period of lockdown, imposed under the National Disaster Management Act, to fast-track all these privatization proposals, so that there will be no agitations in a big way by unions and public. Crores of workers have lost their jobs due to the lockdown. The young are worried about the bleak future. Economy, which was already on the slide down before COVID-19, is now completely down. People at large are in distress and poor without a job due to the COVID. The BJP government apparently considers this period as the golden time, with a good opportunity to sell railways to corporate friends. It has also seized this COVID period to direct all BJP-led state governments to change labor laws in favor of the employers, to make workers into virtual slaves. The government has invited request for qualification (RFQ) submissions from the private corporates, Indian and foreign, for operating 109 routes of over the Indian Railways tracks to run 151 private trains in 12 clusters including Bengaluru, Chandigarh, Jaipur, Delhi, Mumbai, Patna, Prayagraj, Secunderabad, Vijayawada, Howrah, Chennai, and Trivandrum. Bibek de Broglie committee recommended separation of the roles of policy, production, regulation and operation. This was deliberately recommended to facilitate the privatization of the railways in a piecemeal manner. The government has started implementing the recommendations of the Bibek de Broglie committee in the right earnest. It stopped a separate railway budget and merged it with the general budget so that no discussion happens and no voice raises in Parliament about railways. Dedicated Freight Corridor Corporation of India Limited, Indian Railway Stations Development Authority etc. have already been constituted as independent autonomous bodies not under the control of the Railway Board. The government has decided to corporatize the production units to facilitate the privatization. Privatization failed in many countries. But this government, committed to private corporate interests, brushed aside ills of privatization and decided to privatize trains, jeopardizing safety of passengers and ignoring the burden that is going to fall on poor people for the travel. The arguments in favor of private participation are that it would improve efficiency, with world-class travel experience, and reduce journey time, with high standard of services, etc. In addition, the government is arguing that privatization would generate employment and the government would be able to earn revenue through haulage charges, energy charges, etc. These are invalid arguments, not supported by facts. We have witnessed deaths and grievous injuries due to industrial accidents, mainly caused by absolute negligence of private owners in many private companies. An estimated 20,000 people choke to death and thousands more develop severe health complications and continue to suffer for decades due to leaking of a deadly gas at the Union Carbide pesticide factory at Bhopal owned by a multinational company. Recently 12 people in the nearby villages died and over 1,000 became sick due to gas leakage from a plant near Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh state, owned by the South Korean LG Polymers. These are only a couple of examples in our country where big multinational corporations are involved. Many such examples can be cited across the world. Hundreds of industrial accidents have been taking place, killing thousands of workers every year in our country alone due to the utter negligence of safety by the profit-greedy private employers, in their attempt to save money. To expect safety in railways under private control is nothing but a cruel joke to deceive the people. Punctuality, efficiency etc. do not depend on ownership but depend upon the efficient maintenance of the tracks, signaling system, the rolling stock etc. as well as the recruitment of skilled personnel in adequate numbers, and above all, effective synergy between the different functions of railway operations. Successive governments have neglected all these. They never implemented the recommendations of the Task Force on Safety, submitted in 2017 or that of the White Paper of the Railway Ministry in 2015. It has been estimated that 4,500 kilometers of old track needs to be replaced every year. But this is not done on the pretext of lack of financial resources. As a result, backlog goes on increasing. Replacement of signal gear that has become overaged is not being done, on the same pretext. In spite of that, Railways has a good track record on safety. Production units are the gems of Indian Railways. The 6 production units of Indian Railways manufacture 600 diesel and electric locomotives and more than 3,000 coaches. But this government is preparing to make them into a corporation so as to finally sell all these gems. The government has also decided to close down the printing presses of railways in various parts of the country. Probably this too is meant to benefit the printing presses in the private sector. At present, passenger fares compensate only for 53% of the cost, with 47% of the cost being subsidized. This subsidy will now be given a go-by. This means that the fares will almost double. Indian Railways, till now an affordable mode of transport for the poor and toiling people, will no more be so. The passenger fares in Indian Railways will be increased to provide a level playing field for the corporates so that they can compete with the Indian Railways and earn profits. The government is obviously eager to ensure profits for the private corporates by throwing away its responsibility of fulfilling the requirements of the common people. The entire thrust of Bibek-de Broglie Committee recommendations, which the government has already started implementing, is towards privatization of Indian Railways. These recommendations will sound the death knell for the railways as a public service organization. They will directly affect 12 lakh workers employed in the railways as well as 2 lakh common people traveling by passenger trains. The number of railway employees has already been reduced as a policy, during the last 25 years from 18 lakhs to 12 lakhs in spite of train count increasing by 100%. This has increased the workload on existing employees. The number of contract workers, outsourced workers has risen enormously during this period. Large numbers of jobs earlier performed by railway workers are now outsourced to contractors. The contract workers are subjected to the worst type of inhuman exploitation. They are paid 1/3 or 1/4 of the wages paid to regular workers even as they do the same work. They are not provided with any social security benefits. Service is not the motto of the private sector. It does not invest for charity. It invests for profits and often selects areas which provide more profits. It closes shop and withdraws from any enterprise if it does not get its anticipated profits. It does not bother about the difficulties of the people or the loss of jobs of the workers. That is the experience all over the world and across various sectors. It is regrettable that our government does not want to learn lessons from the experiences of countries which have privatized railways, like Great Britain. Such grave anti-national and destructive policies should not be allowed. Let us send a strong warning to the BJP-led government that privatization and handing over of Indian Railways, the prestigious institution of the nation, will not be tolerated. Let us make it clear to the government that it can go ahead with its dangerous plan only at its own peril. The working class will gear up for an indefinite country-wide general strike, if the government dares to neglect the united voices of the workers and all sections of the toiling people. Sankararao Chodavarapu GSS SCRMU SC 15-9-2020